Okay, we're going to talk about S4C.1, S4E.1, different forms of equations of lines. So we got 2 points here. B is 3, 3 comma 5. There's B right there. And E is 7 comma 3 right there. So we want to find the slope. Gradient means slope. Okay, and so you may have noticed or seen that slope from our equation on the board, y2 minus y1 equals x2 minus x1. Okay, so using that that expression, we can pick the two y values, and we're going to subtract them from each other. So, and then we're going to take the two x values, and we're going to subtract them from each other. Now, one of the main questions people had during class is which one am I going to use for x and y, y1, y2, and which one's going to be x2, y2. It really doesn't matter. If I'm going to call this one x2, y2, I'll call this x1, y1, then I would get, let's zoom in a little bit. It's probably hard for you to see. Then I would get 5 minus 3, blue minus the blue, divided by 3 minus the 7. Okay, so I made this one x2, I made that one y2, made this one x1, made this one y1. And so I have the difference between the y values and the difference between the x values, and that gets me my slope. So then I end up with 2 over negative 4, which simplifies to negative 1/2. Now, on my original answer key, I set this one for x1 and y1 and this one for x2, y2. And it doesn't matter which one, you're still going to get negative 1/2. When I changed the 3 and the 5 and the 7 and the 3, here I got negative 2 over 4. And the one I just showed you a second ago, we got 2 over negative 4. Both of those are still negative 1/2. Okay. Calculate the midpoint. Okay, so the midpoint is when you take the average of the x values. So x1 plus x2 and y1 plus y2. Okay, so I'm going to add those y values together, and I'm going to add those x values together and divide by 2. And let's just do that. So we get 3 plus 7 over 2. And we have 5 plus 3 over 2. And when we simplify that, we get 10 over 2 and 8 over 2, which simplifies to 5 comma 4. So if I plot that point 5 comma 4, 5 comma 4 is this pink dot, and you can see it's halfway between those points. So finding the slope and finding the midpoint is a critical skill in this chapter. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to focus on is putting something in point gradient form, which looks like this: y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. So basically what you do here is I'm replacing y1 with a a y value. So if I use this point here, 3, 5, I'm going to replace the y subscript 1 with the 5. And here the x subscript 1 I'm replacing with this x value 3. Okay, and then my slope, the m value, we put in a negative 1/2. Okay, now if I use this other point, I could plug in the 7 in place of x right there, and I could plug in the 3 in place of y1 right there, and I can place the negative 1/2 in for the slope. Now there's two ways to find it in slope-intercept form. This form is you did in Algebra 1 a lot, I'm sure. So let's talk about what I did. Okay, so often we just start off with y equals mx plus b, and then I just take one of the points, right? One of the points here was 3, 5, right? So I could plug in the 3 here for x. I can plug in the 5 here for y, and we know our slope is negative 1/2. Right? So negative 1/2 times 3 is negative 1.5, 1.5. And then if I add 1.5 on both sides, that makes this cancel out, right? And then I end up with 6.5 equals b. And now my equation is in slope-intercept form, or gradient-intercept form. There were people in class that just wrote this was the answer. No, I mean that's what you've done is correct, but if it's in slope-intercept form, you have to write it like this. Now, another way to solve this, I think it's a little bit easier. You could take one of these point gradient forms, and so I just took this one here, right? We got y minus 5 equals negative 1/2 times x minus 3, right? I could do distributive property with the 1/2, the negative 1/2. Careful with the signs. Negative times negative, that becomes positive, right? So I do distributive property with that, and then I can add 5 on both sides, and we get the same answer as we got here. Okay. Now, part E is something that we haven't done a lot of. So whenever you see the z like this, z means integers. Okay, so the a, the b, and the d, those coefficients can't have decimals. No decimals or fraction. Right. So we want our equation to look like this. So we've got this answer from part D, our gradient intercept form or slope intercept form, right? So one of the things I can do is I can notice here I've got a 1/2 and I've got 6.5. To turn this and these coefficients into integers, if I multiply both sides of the equation by 2, then I end up with 2 times y gives me 2y. 2 times negative 1/2 x gives me negative x, and 2 times 6.5 gives me 13. Okay, and now I just have one more step. I want to have everything on one side of the equal sign. So I can add x on both sides, and I can subtract 13 on both sides. And so by doing that, that goes away, and that goes away, and then I end up with x plus 2y minus 13 equals 0. Now, in class, I saw a lot of people with this, but they had the things in different orders. Like maybe they had the 2y first, or the negative 13 first. When you're writing it in standard form, it needs to be alphabetical. The term with the x comes first, the term with the y comes second, and the term without the variable x or y comes last. Okay? So, okay, so I'm just going to show this and walk it through. So, just like in the previous example, your y values are 7 and 1, so I'm going to subtract them. So I could do 1 minus 7, and then my x values are 11 and 9. So if I'm going to have the 1 first here, then I'm going to have the 9 first here. Okay, and then if I have the 7 last here, I'm going to have the 11 last here. Okay, so um, so 1 minus 7 is going to give me negative 6. 9 minus 11 is going to give me negative 2. And a negative divided by a negative gives me positive 3. Okay. So calculating the midpoint, I take the average of the x values, the 11 and the 9. And then 11 plus 9 is going to give me 20. And 20 divided by 2 is going to give me 10. I can take the average of the y values, the 7 and the 1. 7 plus 1 is going to give me 8. And 8 divided by 2 is going to give me 4. And so now I've got this point, 10, 4, which plots right there. And you can tell that it even looks like it's halfway between C and D, doesn't it? Okay. So now I'm going to put my equation in point gradient form, or point slope form. So I'm replacing the y subscript 1. I'm replacing that with 7, and I'm replacing the x subscript 1, and I'm replacing that with x. Or you could write it like this. This is equally correct. If I wanted to use this 1 for y and this 9 for x. Both are correct. Now, to do it in point gradient form, as I said before, you could do it this way, or you could do it this way. It truly doesn't matter. So if I'm doing it this way, here we replace x with 11, we replace y with 7. I can simplify. 3 times 11 gives me 33. Subtract 33 on both sides, I get b is negative 26, and there we go. Or I can write this in my slope-intercept form. Right? We know the slope is 3. We know that the y value is 7 and the x value is 11. I could use either of these equations. After I do distributive property with a 3, I get 3x minus 33. And then after adding 7 on both sides, I get this answer. So as I said, both are correct. Both answers are correct. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Okay, and then lastly, we want to put it in standard form. So I just subtracted y on both sides. And now the only thing left on this side, there's nothing left on this side, right? So now I've got 0. And so notice where I put the y, I didn't put it at the end. I'm doing it in alphabetical order. 3x minus y minus 26. So usually they have the 0 on the right-hand side, so that's where I'm putting my 0. Okay, so if you're going to do your IB test, you're going to want to have it in this order. Now, I saw a lot of people writing negative 3x plus y plus 26 equals 0. That answer is okay, but in IB, when you look at an answer key or a mark scheme from IB, they typically and strongly encourage that this coefficient here be positive. So to make it positive, you could just multiply each term by negative 1. So then this would become positive 3x, negative y, and negative 26. And if I multiply 0 times negative 1, well, that's still 0, right? So these answers are the same. but you want to have it like this more often. Hope that helps.